All right, we're back. 2 rounds left, sort of. You can call them rounds, elimination rounds. I guess they're rounds. They're just not Swiss rounds, right? They usually go
Yeah,
fast.
yeah.
All right.
They're untimed, and people get to technically spend as long as they want, but not really. And I feel like they usually actually end up going faster than normal rounds. I feel like when you have the clock and people are like, "Oh, I can spend this much time to make a decision," people actually end up taking a lot longer.
Yeah. All right. So you saw the bracket already. We got Joseph Bernal versus Rodney Bedell. That's what we're going to watch. We've got Don DeLozier versus Isaac Bullwinkle on the secondary match. If the Blue Red Delver versus Depths finishes first, we'll move into that and pick it up live. Let's go ahead and give the players a go ahead and go down to the table. This is the top 4 of the 140 player legacy event. We shall see who's going to come out on top. Joseph Bernal for the second time this year. Rodney Bedell looking to knock him out of the way with Selesnya Reclaimer. We shall see.
Yeah, we actually just saw Rodney take down an Izzet Delver deck right before this, so likely something that Rodney has had to play against a lot, and something that Rodney came prepared for. And I would guess, considering that we've seen so many lists tailored to play against Izzet Delver, that Rodney's deck is no different.
Yeah, so I can tell you, actually looking at his history within this event, Rodney Bedell played against Blue Red in round 4, 5, 7, 8, and the quarterfinals.
That's so more than half the rounds on the day.
6th one today.
Oof.
I can also tell you this. In those 5 Blue-Red matches, Rodney Bedell has yet to lose a game.
Oh, has gone 2-0 every single time?
Every single time.
Well, that bodes well for Rodney here, especially considering that out of the 4 people in top 4, Rodney is the only one not playing in his list.
Yeah. Okay. So we can see the early game development here. We have a Delver of Secrets for Joseph Bernal, which, I mean, these Delvers are due to flip at some point. Again, this one failed. We've seen these not flipping all day long. Maybe the reason Isaac Bullwinkle decided not to play with Delvers is because they just don't flip for him, just like they don't flip for anybody else.
Honestly, that's enough to make me not want to play Delver. So I would not blame anyone if they were like, you know what, I just played Izzet Delver for a little too long and watched a few too many of my Delvers not flip. And I'd be like, you know what, that's fair. It's a little bit results-oriented thinking, but also, like, that's one that you start to see enough times and you're just like, this is too annoying. I'd rather play just the reliable Dragon Rage channel.
Yeah, all right. So Rodney Bedell, we're looking at Savannah, Dryad Arbor. We have Thespian Stage, and we have Dark Depths. That's that portends monsters escaping from ice prisons and potentially wrecking house.
Yeah, especially considering that we were able to accelerate with this Dryad Arbor. That's going to happen a lot sooner than we maybe would think it would. And Rodney is the only person playing a lands style of deck that we've actually been able to see assemble a Merit Lage.
Right. Now, Bernal, and Rodney knows this because deck lists were open in top 8. Bernal was the only one of our Izzet players that's playing 2 copies of Brazen Borrower. So there could be some hesitation on Rodney's side to actually run out the Merit Lage. Here is a Pyroblast on the okay. Bernal's just going to pack it up. So
okay.
What just happened there? We saw a Pyroblast on the Dark Depths just to throw in the graveyard to be able to play Murktide. I'm pretty sure this is what we just witnessed. Just to build Murktide. Bernal goes to commit the Murktide, and then Rodney's going to make a 2020 Merit Lage. Murktide's going to immediately have to chump block, and that's it. And Bernal just decides, well, that's it.
That was an interpretive dance of what just happened in the match. You're welcome.
Okay. Also, I feel like our camera quality is falling off a cliff in the last hour, but maybe that's just me being tired, and this is just how I actually look right now, like kind of fuzzed out and like, yeah.
Honestly, yeah, that actually makes sense. So that's something I recently had some computer trouble, and somebody was like, oh, do you keep your computer on all the time? And I was like, yeah, I'm also like on it all the time. And they were like, oh, so you just turn it off very often? And I was like, yeah. And they were like, oh, that's probably what caused this issue. So yeah, they do get tired.
Yeah. All right. So let's go ahead and take a look at these deck lists. See what's going on. Bernal, as you can see there with the 2 Brazen Borrowers main deck, but they were not available that game. I take it.
Mhm.
But he did draw the Pyroblast, unfortunately for him.
Again, we went from seeing, maybe I'm gonna start taking back what I've been saying. Normally I look at like Brainstorm, Ponder, and Dragon Rage Channeler, and I'm like, there's a ton of card selection in here. You don't have to worry about running into your 2 of main board card and like having it get stuck in your hand. We've seen that happen so much in just like 3 rounds that maybe me saying that has either jinxed all these players or there isn't actually as much selection as I feel like the deck has just by looking at these cards.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, all options on the table. All right, Bernal's sideboard here. We know he loves Submerge. We've seen him play it in multiple different years, basically always in these blue-red Delver decks. We see a couple copies here. We see, are we excited about much else? I think we probably aren't. Maybe you bring in Force of Negation to deal with some of the scary sideboard cards, but
Yeah.
really, this isn't great. He's not going to gain a whole lot here.
Yeah, and this is, I think, one of the rough situations that we're running into, and why Rodney is probably doing so well in this tournament is because it's a deck that people aren't coming as prepared to fight against.
Submerge, however, it should be said, is excellent, but it's only a couple cards. All right, let's go ahead and look at Rodney's list. Other kind of deck, we have the 3, and I'm sorry, there's 2 Endurance main in this list, an extra copy in the sideboard, alongside Pyroblasts here, which are strong, Chokes, which are potentially strong. There is 1 Hamster card main in 1 board. Don't ask me if that comes in here or not. I would guess not, as this seems more like an anti-control measure. But the card not being printed on Magic Online, I haven't had experience playing with it or against it yet. So basically, that's what we're looking at. Some anti-flyer defense, some mana hate, and these Pyroblasts, which are just great all around. Versus Submerges Bernal brings in. Otherwise, we're playing the main decks. I mean, the strategies aren't going to change, regardless of whether our removal improves or not in number or quality. The strategies are the same. Rodney is going to try and go up the ground with some creatures that grow with time and get bigger and become attackers that threaten Merit Lage. And Bernal is going to try and get going with flyers and do his best to keep Rodney from assembling Merit Lage. And that's tricky because you got to pick and choose what creature you can remove. You can't kill them all.
Very true. And Rodney going to be taking a mulligan here on the draw. This is kind of an interesting situation because we saw that in that first game, assembling Merit Lage was enough for Rodney to be able to take it down. Going further into these games, especially now that we're getting to see open deck lists, do you think that Rodney is just looking for that very linear game plan once again?
No, I don't, because having the Merit Lage work effectively right off the bat is not something that Rodney can just do. If Bernal has a Wasteland on the board, that shuts it down. So that's an opportunistic play, I would say, more than something you can really plan on in the early game.
All right, Diamond to start off, and a Delver for Joseph. So we'll see Delver flip, maybe.
Not unless his luck's changed. And you see, Dark Depths pitched to Mox Diamond right away. I don't know if there's another copy in hand or not, but Rodney's looking for mana sources to develop. He's not looking for. And once again.
Again, maybe I just jinxed every Delver player. Fortunately, but Ponder hopefully going to make things a little bit easier for. See, there's a Brainstorm and a Flusterstorm right there. Those would have done it.
Yeah, you're right. But they were dodging the top of the deck.
And there's only 2. You were talking about the Dark Depths being exiled to the Mox Diamond, and it is a 1 of 2 copies. So it would be surprising for both of them to be in hand, but not unheard of.
All right, and there is a Wasteland for Joseph. And Delver opens the scoring in game 2 by coming across for 1. Notable that Rodney could have removed that with a blast in hand, but chose not to, unsurprisingly. Sometimes those measures are saved for the stronger threats.
Mm-hmm. Ooh, Flagstones of Trocaire are going to be a nice land to place down, at least in face of the Wasteland that Joseph has in play. And all right, took a turn, but got that Brainstorm to the top of the deck so that we can get this Insectile Aberration.
Yeah, actually, lots of Brainstorms in hand for Bernal right now. Looking for more colored mana sources to add threats to the board and get this pressure on. And actually, Rodney's going to go after the Brainstorm.
Ooh. Okay. I mean, maybe that wouldn't be the call if Rodney knew what we knew and knew that there is approximately 2 more copies in hand, but
right. There is a
just
source
being
take out the
really
Delver.
aggressive.
And Bernal plays his team events tapped, and that will likely be the end of the turn here. So Rodney's got now opportunity. Let's see. Does he have a threat on the way back? Definitely has dealt with Bernal's early offense.
Mm-hmm. That early offense usually can segue into a Murktide that can do quite a bit of damage. But as we mentioned earlier, Rodney has not lost a game to an Izzet Delver deck on the day, and that has been approximately more than half of what Rodney has played against.
Yeah,
So
it absolutely has.
Swept Heath going to go ahead. Forest is going to be the land of choice, continuing to be conscious of this wasteland that's in play.
And these two actually played each other in round 7. And Rodney did win that one, obviously, as he hasn't lost to the matchup yet. And here's a choke. Bernal with 2 tap blue sources has Force of Negation to bail himself out here and keep this game going, as that choke would have been pretty ugly. In fact, I think the rest of Bernal's hand is another pitch counter and the other Brainstorm.
It looks like Wasteland's going to be able to take care of Volcanic Island, and Rodney just using the resources at hand to try and just continue to slow down Joseph while we try to look for, I imagine, some threat to start punching in for damage.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's only 1 card left in Rodney's hand, but he has definitely made Bernal expend some resources here. Choke, very threatening card, obviously.
Yeah, I wasn't able to make out the other final card left in Rodney's hand, and Windswept Heath is going to be the land drop and pass for turn, and it seems like it's potentially a little bit of a scary place for Rodney to be in.
That was interesting, the way that Rodney played that fetch land. He seemed, I don't know, hesitant maybe to commit to the board. He just wasn't sure what he was doing. It was just the timing, I guess. He was deciding when he wanted to fetch. And here is an Endurance. So, okay, that explains that. This is a upkeep endurance, I believe, and Mox Diamond available to pay for a Daze, which Bernal does have, or at least had. I'm not sure he still does.
Something's considered this endurance is probably nice that Rodney finally has a threat on the board, but Joseph probably not feeling all too scared here. I think that I would be more afraid of my land situation if I was Joseph than the state of the board, aside from my lands.
Yeah, I mean, that's reasonable. Rodney being empty-handed when you've got 4 cards in your hand, that's nice. There's players looking at life totals here for a moment or something. Some element of the game is being straightened out that was confused between the 2 players. But now we're ready to continue. Ponder finds Brainstorm and 2 land. Well, Brainstorm's
Have
nice.
we seen every Brainstorm? Or I guess the Brainstorms got shuffled back in from, okay.
Yeah, I think
There's
this
a lot
is,
of brainstorm in this.
it is. I think this is the third one. There's a fetch that can shuffle the 2 lands away and then reopen the top of the deck for the next turn. And Bernal, lots of life to play with.
Right, brainstorm
And
in
land
again.
force. Ugh. I mean, not exactly. I mean, Bernal with a lot of cards in hand. But I
Yeah.
don't think he has anything that impacts the board right now.
Yeah, it's a lot of like counter spells, and I mean, brainstorm's got to feel kind of nice to have. There's one more brainstorm in hand, I believe, and Misty can kind of clean it up as you mentioned. But yeah,
Right.
if you've got something applying pressure,
Right. And these are just, I mean, so many of the creatures in the green-white deck are just forced 2-for-1s. Like, Knight of the Reliquary, I mean, this is just an average creature in Rodney's deck, but it's such a big problem. Bernal's forced to force.
force to force.
Exactly.
Yeah, all things considered, the Knight of the Reliquary would at least have been a 5/5, potentially actually I think a 6/6 because I think that's a Wasteland in the yard as well for Rodney. So it was going to start to hit for a lot. So definitely something that I think is worth rather take hits from the endurance than something like the Knight of the Reliquary and using some of these the counters to just get them out of the hand, and maybe we'll be able to draw a Murktide Regent that will be able to do some blocking.
Yeah, an 8/8. Yeah, a full size. Well, I guess it wouldn't be an 8/8, would it?
Mm-mm.
And Bernal passes the turn again. And yeah, Rodney continues, not even to untap the endurance, just points at Bernal, like, okay, take 3, pass.
Looks
I
like we
mean,
have another Force of Will and the Flusterstorm in hand for sure for Bernal.
yeah, bang. I mean, this is adding up.
Is indeed adding up. Like we're getting a raid from Honorog. Thank you.
Yeah, so that's awesome. Honorard Dust sending over his crowd. For everyone that's just joining up, we're in the semifinals of our Legacy 5K. Rodney Bedell up a game. This is his 6th match against Izzet decks on the day. He has not lost a game yet, which, I mean, at some point, you're just going to mull to 3 and lose, right? It has to happen eventually.
Eventually,
Yeah,
sometime, but
maybe not today. I
yeah.
mean, did win game 1. Rodney is the only non-blue-red deck in the top 4. Here's Pyromancer from Bernal. That's nice. That provides a stream of chump blockers if he can get anything going. Rodney, again, just endurance just continues to come in, never untaps.
Rodney not even looking at half of his hand.
Yeah. And passes the turn. And now he has to consider, well, if I cast something and it gets forced, Bernal's going to get a chump blocker.
Oh.
Oh, okay. Here is some action. Swords of Plowshares on the Pyromancer.
I think that even though there's 2 mana tapped, I think that Rodney is trying to do this on Joseph's turn, on the start of Joseph's turn.
It kind of looked like that too. I had that thought also. I'm not sure exactly what triggered that in me to think that, but those lands are definitely tapped. So
Yeah.
Bernal has a Submerge in hand.
I could have
So
sworn we'd just watched Joseph draw for turn, which is why it led me to feel that way.
all right, Submerged Endurance for a token. Submerge, such a cool card. Really good at what it does, except for the time I redesigned my Miracles deck thinking there'd be lots of Infect, played 3 in the board, and there was no Infect.
Oh no.
But as long as you don't do silly things like overloading on very narrow cards, really, really a strong card. And there's a Pyroblast on the forest. So Bernal empty-handed with 2 tokens, Rodney with a couple cards left, and Endurance on top. And
I guess it
Joseph
was
just,
on Rodney's.
yeah, Joseph just hasn't had, his deck has not served up creatures this game, really. I mean, there's been a couple, we saw a couple at the beginning, and here goes another huge chunk of cards to the bottom of the deck, to the bottom of the library. So Murktide is a couple turns away again if one was to come up.
It looks like it's a Force and another Young Pyromancer is the draw for turn. Endurance back on attacking duty.
At least it untapped this time.
That's true.
And here's
Untapped
another-
because it was on the top of the library.
Well, yeah, that's true. Okay, so another Reliquary comes in and resolves Joseph Bernal with, yeah, you're right. He does have another Forest and a Pyromancer, and that's on the board now. But this Knight is, I'm not sure, but as long as it's a 5/5 at least, it can freely attack.
Mhm.
Probably
Yeah,
does
I think
anyway.
it has to be a 6/6 as long as nothing has changed about Rodney's.
Another 2-for-1. That's the third, I think, pitch cast counter this game. So Joseph just run out of resources here. All right, chump block instead of committing most of his board to trade with the Endurance.
I think that makes sense. I think you're trying to keep this Young Pyromancer around for as long as possible.
So this Knight may have just been a 5/5. I can see 2 Windswept Heaths in the graveyard, and then the top card above the red Elemental Blast, I think, is a land as well. So
yeah, there's the Dark Depths, the 2 Windswept Heaths, and then there's a Wasteland as well.
Right, you're right. The Dark Depths got pitched to the Mox Diamond. That's correct. All right, Savannah comes in, Lightning Bolt to trade alongside the token for the Endurance. The token replenishes itself, and the Knight will grow itself a little bit and potentially save the Endurance. Yes, indeed. Sejiri Step. Protection from red. This is getting rough. Bernal with no cards left in hand. Rodney with 2. One of them is another copy of Endurance, and I don't know if Bernal has a card that can dig him out at this point.
Yeah, you gotta be coming up with something that allows you to cast 2 spells a turn to forever
that's
make
it.
a bunch of blockers, but yep, as you
Rodney
mentioned,
Bedell.
it's too difficult.
7 Izzet matches, 14 game wins for Rodney Bedell. He is not messing around.
Absolutely not.
Into the finals for him. Congratulations to him. I believe the other semifinal is still in action. If that's the case, go ahead and take us down to the table, and we'll catch up with the board state as we see it. So we have Don DeLozier versus Isaac Bullwinkle. Izzet Delver versus Izzet mid-range-ish, and you can see the counterbalances there.
Mhm.
The
And I also have to mention that yesterday when we had an interview with somebody, they said that they'd driven here with Isaac and Dawn. So I believe that these two came in the same car to this event.
Well, one of them's going to the finals, and one of them is not. Isaac looks to be up a game here, and we see the counterbalance in play. And you may look at that and say, "Oh, okay, nice sideboard card. Lots of people have that." Isaac is not sideboarding counterbalance. He's playing wasn't he the one playing the? No, I'm sorry, I'm wrong. He's playing Predicts main. I knew there was something unusual. He's playing the Predicts main. The counterbalances on the board, and the counterbalance does get picked off here. Murktide swings in for 8, the full amount, and Isaac felt very strong about his deck.
And felt strong about it in specifically the mirror as well.
Right. Yeah. The counterbalances, the Predicts, the Maddening Hex in the sideboard. The Predict is the thing that's the most interesting to me because that's a card that really nobody's playing in these blue-red decks. I'll try and keep myself from saying Delver because Isaac is not playing Delver.
Right. Big Dragon.
Okay, well, that will even up the board. Barring anything else, Dawn can force a trade if she would like by just attacking. Isaac would be forced to trade. However, this is a sideboard game, and there are lots of blasts and such and petty thefts running around in these scenarios. So we'll see if Isaac's Murktide actually manages to stay on the board. There's 2 land. There's a second Murktide. We've seen this a couple times today. 2 Murktides the same turn. This is going to grow the first Murktide very large, but the second one is going to get caught by a Daze. So 1 very large Murktide and 1 in the graveyard, and a blast will finish it up.
All right. And just like that,
so
finish it up and even it up.
Yeah. So going to game 3, Don DeLozier versus Isaac Bullwinkle. Okay. Well, what do we think here? We have, in general, as we wait for game 3 or deck list to be prepared, the more controlling deck, if you're the slightly slower deck, it generally is going to favor you. And I think we could say that Isaac is. We also we have Ledger Shredders versus Delvers.
Yeah.
With 1 trigger, with 1 connive trigger, as long as a land is, as long as a non-land is discarded, the Shredder then basically beats the Delver going forward. And we have Predict, which we haven't seen it yet on camera, but we know, we've heard him talk about it. We know it's in there. There is the opportunity to set it up with Mishra's Bauble, with Ponder, with Brainstorm, or with Counterbalance now that we are in sideboard games. So there is more card advantage, and there is slightly more strength in the creatures here in Isaac's deck.
Or at least a different strength.
Yeah. So in theory, his deck should be slightly slower and slightly stronger, would be my estimate. That doesn't always pay off. Being slightly ahead doesn't mean you're going to win every single time, unless you're Rodney Bedell. But you can see what Isaac has access to here. We've seen the Maddening Hex and the counterbalances be brought in for mirror matches, so we know those are well set. We know those blasts are all coming in. So that's probably what Isaac's working with. If we look over at Don DeLozier's deck list, whenever we have
it may
it
not
ready.
be ready.
Okay, I may have jumped the gun a little bit there.
Looking at a lot of the same things. Yeah,
Right.
there's going to be 3 less Mishra's Baubles and different numbers of things in the sideboard. Is not playing 2 counterbalances, it's just playing 1 and 1 Maddening Hex. So that could be something that ends up being a little bit of a problem, is the difference in those numbers. But across the board, widely very similar decks, save for those creatures that are in the main board.
Yeah. All right. So the players are drawing the open hands. You now know what we're looking at, what we're playing with for game 3 of the second semifinal. Who earns the right to attempt for the pride of all blue-red Delver players, or blue-red players, to face Rodney Bedell in the finals?
Yeah, to have the moment to try and take down the blue-red slayer.
Yeah, there's a legion of blue-red players wanting to see Rodney defeated here in the finals. And there's everyone else who is rooting against blue-red in any capacity. So
yeah,
if you're a fan of Rodney and you're hoping he wins, go ahead and follow Nerd Rage Gaming. If, on the other hand, you're rooting for the blue-red Delver players, the way you can show us that is to follow Nerd Rage Gaming. All your votes will be counted, I promise.
Oh, you should have said that somebody should subscribe. Like, if you're a fan of Izzet, you should subscribe, because
I don't want to be
then we have 2 different. That's fair. But we got to know the difference between the people who are for one or the other. So that's what I'm voting for.
I don't know. I'm responsible to Nerd Rage ownership, and I think they only care that people are watching. They don't care who they're rooting for.
That's very fair.
All right. So Delver on the play for Dawn. That is the difference. The prime difference in the decks is that Dawn has double the number of 1-drops.
Yeah, wouldn't it have been funny if we got to see Isaac just start with a Darcy and then Dawn start with an Izzet Delver and see which one got pumped up first?
Yeah. Based on Joseph Bernal's games, it would not have been the Delver, but some people's Delvers have to be flipping. You didn't get all the way to the semifinals with it never flipping unless you were aiding it with a Brainstorm. So let's see. Here we go. Is it a counterbalance? It is. Ooh. That's a beating. That's a hard card to deal with. Dawn does have a Daze, though, to keep it off the board, and Isaac can't fight back over it. So, all right. 1 powerful sideboard card dispatched. And the Delver flips. It had to happen eventually.
Yeah, this might be the earliest Delver flip that we've seen in some time, but there are no lands in play, so a ways away from that expressive iteration at least.
She can fix that.
Yeah,
Bang, there you
yeah.
go. Land in play, no problem. We knew she had at least one.
Yeah, and I think there's another one in hand. So actually is going to be looking just fine, but we'll see if that tempo is going to end up mattering or if Isaac's going to be kind of stuck behind after that counterbalance didn't resolve.
Okay. Isaac getting ready for turn 3. Both players with iteration in hand. Both players with sufficient mana. Okay, Dawn with the second Bedelver. So this puts a little more pressure on Isaac's deck to actually interact as opposed to just building advantage. We know there's iteration. We know there's at least a Brainstorm. In fact, I think there's 2 Brainstorms. But none of that's going to get those 2 Delvers off the board. And Isaac at 14 already. If the second Delver flips, I mean, that life total can go kind of quick.
Somebody earlier had made a question or asked a question, made a question about if you have a double-sided card, which side do you get signed by the artist? And I guess Dawn found the answer. You get them to sign both sides.
Both? Sure. Yeah. Okay. That makes sense to me. A question in the chat about what makes Isaac's deck. Is it control? Well, I don't know that I would necessarily qualify it as is it control, even though we do have that listed here. But there are predicts in the main deck. There are ledger shredders. So it is, and there are not Delver Secrets. So it's a little slower, a little more card advantage. So that was the term that was implemented for today.
Basically, we couldn't call it Is It Delver if it doesn't play Delver of Secrets.
Right.
Is it Shredder? I actually like that a lot. That's what I'm gonna start calling it personally. And it may or may not be because I'm a big fan of the character Shredder from.
What if it's just a random foot and you couldn't tell the difference?
I don't know.
Yeah.
All right. Getting that Steam Vents in play so that Mystic Sanctuary can be on a line.
I like it in the chat. Is it Combat Delver ? We can still call it Is It Delver. Issue solved. Petty Theft coming down to lift the Insectile Aberration and make it start over. Reasonable play. Dawn is going to consider this. And yeah, that's going to go through.
Oh.
So nice for Isaac. Buys time. Okay. Volcanic Island drawn. Delver only coming across for 1. So Isaac's life total much safer than it looked a minute ago.
Cards in hand for Isaac look to be Expressive Iteration, Dragon Rage Channeler, Hydroblast?
Hydroblast would make sense also. Both players bringing in all kinds of blasts. 3 actually, potentially.
And then I started blasting.
Pyroblast.
Sometimes I wish we could do gifts in Twitch chat, and then I'm actually happy that we can't.
I know another chat I'm in that didn't allow gifts, and then they changed their mind and allowed them, and boy, it was better before.
Yeah, I agree. It's a little bit too crazy.
All right, so Dawn with Red Blast at the ready. See what Isaac deploys here. Dragon Rage Channeler Iteration in hand. Both of those together would look mighty fine for a turn.
We're pretty close to having Delirium as well. That counterbalance making at least having a Darcy as a blocker for a turn as a 3/3 seemed kind of appealing.
Right. So Isaac leads on Expressive Iteration. This is a play that, since it's not what I would consider the obvious play, I would say this reeks of experience, holding up Hydroblast and also potentially being able to pay for a Daze. So the iteration will resolve. Pyroblast left up, and then this can take down one of the Delvers. So this is a pretty good turn for Isaac Bullwinkle, fighting through a Red Blast. And okay, one Delver does go down.
And a big thank you to everyone in the chat who are hitting us with those Prime subscriptions. All right, there's been 2 Delvers kind of hanging around for a long time, but now only 1 remains.
Well,
lower
one is
on
all you
life,
need.
also lower on cards, yeah?
What's that?
Isaac lower on life and lower on cards, I believe, as well.
I think that's correct. It does have initial land input. It does have the Brazen Borrower in the Adventure Zone, so that is a card that can get paid off eventually. Here is Maddening Hex.
Ooh.
This one is one we have seen do some damage today, so that's in there. Maddening Hex, a curse. Isaac is now cursed. Whenever he plays a spell, a dice will be rolled. I'm sorry, a non-creature spell, and Isaac will take damage. And at 10, I mean, conceivably, that's just 2 spells. That would be a bit unfortunate for Isaac, but it is, a possibility.
Yep. 10 HP makes that look pretty scary, but we'll see if there's going to be a way for Isaac to handle it. And
I mean, this could end real quick. Here it is. 6! Oh boy. Good luck with your iteration. Isaac Bullwinkle down to 4.
Oh, all right. Murktide. 2 Wastelands and a Murktide Regent. None of those handle Maddening Hex.
No, but Murktide at least can block Delver. I'm not going to say I like Isaac's chances in this game at this point. But,
well, in a lot of ways, Isaac is basically locked out of the game.
Yes. Well, he could roll consecutive 1s and get 3 more spells in. So, yeah. Good luck.
We better hope that this is the sickest Murktide of all time. Well, it's got to single-handedly win this game for Isaac.
And it has to survive everything because Dawn just has to play any removal spell. What's Isaac going to do? Counterback? She reveals Pyroblast, which is going to flip, and then Isaac's not even going to bother. And he is out of here, and this is done. And Don DeLozier will prevail, representing the blue-red faction, and face Rodney Bedell in the finals.